Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Today is August 9, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Ira Ingber. Ira, where in the heck you calling in from?
Planet Earth, an insignificant galaxy, they say. I'm in West LA.
West LA. What's the best thing for a human being?
Oxygen.
Oh, I like that answer. Oxygen and air.
I had a German teacher years ago, very funny guy, and he was mentioning someone who had died, and someone said, "Well, what did he die from?" And the teacher said, "Lack of air."
Yeah,
it stuck with me.
What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Probably print.
Print. Did you grow up a reader?
Yeah.
Because your parents read as an example, they told you to read, or on your own?
Both, but I have to show you something. I wanted to get it out for our time together. This was my report card from Los Angeles City Schools, and I want to go through it a little later because it's going to be relevant to us. But I did get A's in reading, both of my first 10 weeks in the fourth grade. So yeah, I think the die was cast early on. But we can go through my report card later because there's some good anomalies on here, I hope.
I love that. I've got one of those. Isn't it great? Great report cards.
And my parents had to sign it. I mean, I think they probably still do.
Yeah.
But there was some element of, contribution, of participation of the parents in this world. And it's just so funny that this particular one I picked, for reasons we can go into later.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I think they're trying to make sense of the present.
Yeah, I like that. And do you think that need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
Oh, I like that question a lot. It's probably a combination of both. You may be familiar with the work of Edward Bernays.
Yes.
Okay, so he's the guy, for those of you out there who don't know, please, everybody who's listening or watching, do a little dive on Edward Bernays. His uncle was Sigmund Freud, but he also was credited, I guess, pretty much without dispute, the person who created need and want from separating them. So he gave Henry Ford the idea of, why are you painting cars black only? People want colors. Well, they don't need colors, yes, but they will want colors. So I think it's a combination of wanting and needing information. And I think now it's been, I hate to use the cliche, weaponized, certainly been monetized beyond anyone's comprehension of probably even 15 or 20 years ago, don't you think?
Yep. And it's what you touched on is called create the disease and offer the cure. That's right. He invented PR, but that was good. So wait a minute. Do thoughts create emotions?
I think so. If you're in touch with both.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
become it.
Wow, that's heavy. See, I got that. McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. You become it. That's good. We're going to go into the word it a lot more. That's good.
Can I name drop Joan Didion for a second? May I?
Sure.
Well, years ago, I was a fellow named Earl McGrath. Everybody's dead, so you can talk about them with impunity, I guess, as long as you say nice things. So Earl had a record company. This was my time with Lowell George, and Lowell got us this deal with Earl, and Earl with Ahmet Ertegun, and blah, 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 blah. But anyway, Earl had a kind of a salon type house, mostly artists. A lot of people dropped by, and then there was this One day I was there, and there was this very tiny bird-like person. He introduced me. It's Joan. And everybody's getting high. I don't think Joan was. Maybe she was. I don't remember. But she was so inquisitive. I remember she liked being around musicians, as it turned out, but
Yeah.
not as a groupie. I don't think it was just she was very bright. Earl attracted this salon type. Ed Ruscha was there, and you know, a lot of it was lost on me. I didn't know who she was until years later because I put, oh, Joan, oh, her, it's the same one. She had a real unearthly presence about her.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah.
No, I
Okay.
like it. Tangents, anecdotes are all good.
Good.
Can humans think without language?
Oh, I think musicians do it all the time.
Yeah.
It's a different language. I mean, I don't know how we have to define language, but I think certainly without words, certainly without having to articulate uh, words that we would be able to communicate. I think it's one of the reasons why musicians have such a hard time. And a lot of musicians I know are not terribly good speakers.
Yeah.
They can't articulate thoughts. Give them an instrument, give them a pen or pencil. That's where it's coming out. And I think just the fact that I'm a voracious reader, and I really idolize writers. I have a sort of a long distance relationship with Michael Chabon, the novelist, and I sent him records, and he sent me thank yous. So, but I think that to answer that question, musicians are the perfect example. Painters too, probably. Maybe sculptors. I mean, anybody doing creative work outside of writing.
That's funny because I just brought up Michael today because he wrote this amazing article 10 years ago saying, yeah, Finnegan's Wake is worth reading. But anyways, I don't want to go on that tangent. We're going to get into music soon. But Ira, I have to interject this one question here because it's so perfect. You anticipated it. You must have ESP. What's more fundamental, language or music?
Fundamental to what?
That's you answered a question with a question. You win. That's what this series is all about. Inventing. You put them all into the context you want, but it is a good question. Yeah, fundamental to what? Yeah.
I think music probably.
Yeah.
For me, because it doesn't require any outside agitation to happen. It just sort of happens.
Yeah.
And I again, drawing on interactions I have with peer musicians, it's clear to see that.
Yeah. Well, Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a whole unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Ira, what do you do when language breaks down? When language doesn't work? What do you?
I have heart pains. I seriously. I mean,
I don't mean to laugh. It's a great answer.
No, but I mean, it's. I have a visceral.
Yeah.
I mean, we're living through these times where language is broken down. We're watching it daily, and words being twisted, mangled, take your pick, and that which you and I grew up with, let's say, time-wise, sort of doesn't have the same a lot of cracks in the foundation, things that we had as assumptions. That I mean, and let's not stop me because I'm going to go too far quickly. But when lying became somehow not a bad thing in the last so many years. Forget lying under oath, but I mean, just sort of not telling the truth stopped having gravitas to a large degree. Anyway, I'll stop.
We're going to get into this, and it's amazing. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I think more feeling beings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Two Alan Turing questions, 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
We have to define soul. Someone like him, given the torture he went through, right? And given the accomplishments he had, for those of you who don't know, he helped shorten World War II. Small accomplishment.
Yeah.
I think it is a function of the soul. Yeah.
Yeah. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Oh, we love that one. I talk to my machines all the time. They don't necessarily talk back to me in words I understand, but because a lot of the work the contemporary musicians do, I'll say contemporary with quotation marks, we spend a lot of time alone now. Less in collaboration, which I don't think is necessarily a good thing. That's reality. And so there are a lot of conversations I have with what most civilians would say are inanimate objects, like, say, a keyboard that's virtual. It's not even hardware. It's living inside the computer, but I'm talking to it. And I have to listen for the answers. Sometimes I get them. So I think in my case, they do.
Yeah.
I strain for the answers a lot of the time because they're sometimes really indecipherable.
But I think the beauty is that you spent a lot of time with musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Frank Zappa had a great comment when he discovered the synclavier or whatever that was 20 or 30 years ago. He says,
"Oh no,
if I would have had this, I would have never went on the road." And it's like, no, Frank, you could have never written those lyrics unless you stood in line for a burrito on Melrose and ran a somewhat normal life, even though he didn't drive and stuff. But do you
he didn't what? He didn't what? He didn't drive.
He didn't drive. Yeah.
No, he did. He had. I remember he had.
Well, no, most of his life he didn't drive. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
A heavy station wagon. I remember way back in the day that I was
very
impressed with how much equipment he could put inside of it.
These cliches of history, and then there are exceptions to it. So that was the beauty. You were there.
I was there.
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Oh, I think they're bound together. I can't separate them.
Yeah.
One without the other doesn't have much purchase for me.
Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
And there was the chicken and the egg waiting for the answer. At the side of the road to get to the other side. Why? Yeah. The answer is yeah.
Yeah. And, there's just a couple of these, and it's more like your hunch. I know it's both. It's just like feeling and thought. Humans are both feeling and thought, but since they're inseparable, but because we invented the word. So it's the next one is, what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Oh, I'd have to think speed of thought.
Nice.
I would have to do that. I mean, considering, we saw those pictures a few weeks back of the James Webb shots, the new telescope, and what 13 billion. You were the one that said the Beefheart Frank exchange, right?
What came before the big? Frank asked Don.
What came before the Big Bang?
What came before the Big Bang?
And Don says the big. I have shared that with some people, and it's one of those delayed reaction. Oh, that's so good. And I said, well, that's Don. I mean, that's perfect. Because I think that looking at those pictures, 13 billion light years, whatever it is, I'm right there, and I didn't have to go 13 billion light years to get there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think human
Well,
hubris at this point takes over, I can go there.
yeah, Ira, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. Okay. Audre Lorde, the poet, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer responded to her and said, "You can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?"
Oh, wow. Authenticity.
Wow. That you give me another word for that. What is authenticity?
Honesty at the risk of losing everything you might fear at any given moment.
That is amazing. We're going to get into that as a great word. What new toy do you suggest?
I mean, a physical toy?
It can, again, you put it into the context you want.
Oh, I have it right here. I keep it all times here. Gotta have that. You know,
That is good.
gotta have that, or you're not going to get anywhere.
Ira,
Great story about the guy who invented. There's a wonderful video about him. He died at 99 years old. I forgot his name. He invented the teeth. He invented. I think he also invented something else. He the slip and slide maybe, but wonderful guy. And there's a whole wonderful documentary about him and how he came up with that. So
I'm going to look that up.
go look out. Inventor of chattering teeth.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Earthquakes.
Nice. You're practical. Earthquakes. Okay. Marshall McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. So, but you know, by artists, I mean musicians, painters, writers. Artists are the antenna of the race, and they're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. That's great. You laugh.
He said that?
This is all fun. I love when people laugh. So I asked you the question McLuhan probed his whole career to you, Ira. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
I think because they're oftentimes they're too frightening to take in.
Yeah.
And to go back to Frank Zappa, I think look how many things Frank said and did 50, 60, 50 plus years ago.
Yeah.
That sound like he could have done them yesterday, said it yesterday. Alan Watts, who I still listen to often, same thing. You can listen to his lectures, and if you just cast aside some of the bad fidelity, the stuff was written yesterday. It's timeless. So these people tapped into these things that I think frighten people.
Yeah.
And then they have to invent ways of making it palatable. Not they, whoever it is. So that in the case of Alan Watts, I mean, he made Zen Buddhism accessible to the Western mind.
Totally.
But before him, it was this, what is that stuff? You know, it's weird stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, the huge McLuhan article came out in the New York Times a couple days ago, and there's 800 comments to the article, and one of them quotes, "I am the slime from the video" by Frank Zappa. "I am gross and perverted. I'm obsessed and deranged. I've existed for years, but very little has changed. I'm a tool of the government and industry too, because I'm destined to rule and regulate you." Like, duh.
And if you want anything that Frank did, probably maybe ever, but you know, from the first album on, Trouble Coming Every Day.
I was going to say Trouble Every Day is Trouble Coming.
I mean, it's just like, if you look at that just lyrically, and you put it in front of, say, a 25-year-old and say, when do you think this thing was written? Don't tell them who wrote it. They may not know anyway, but no one would guess it was done in 1965.
Yeah. Do artists have moral obligation?
No.
Good answer. Again, boom.
Yeah. No. That doesn't enter. It doesn't enter the process. I don't think.
Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Oh, much more afraid of old.
Yeah.
Much more afraid of old. They're too much of a uh, they're handcuffs often.
Beautiful.
Not the idea themselves, but the adherence to them, the strict adherence to them. We're being general, but I think that I mean music's a really good example for what you're saying. So um, the inability for some people, even creatives, to let go of this reverence, earned or not, for what was. Oh, the Beatles was the best thing ever happened. Nothing will ever be better. That kind of thing,
Yeah.
um, which prevents the new from coming in. So yeah, I'm much more afraid of old ideas, holding on to old ideas.
Yeah, that's why when Frank heard the Shags, he said, better than the Beatles even today. What a comment. Okay, we're going to get into music soon, and I'm anxious, but a few more background philosophical
Hmm.
questions. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Oh yeah, uh, sitting. I think I was newly potty trained. How about that for a good start? And I was singing. My parents loved Glenn Miller, and the first music I ever remember hearing in the house as a kid would have been uh, cantorial music, liturgy, Jewish recordings by famous cantors. My father was very observant Jew. So there were 78s of those things, but there were also 78s of Glenn Miller. And I remember sitting in the bathroom and I was singing, and I don't know how accurate I was, either a trumpet or saxophone solo to either String of Pearls or Moonlight Serenade. And I remember it so distinctly because the sound to this day, those pieces of music, those specific Miller pieces of music, are so primal to me.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the label, the RCA Victor label that Presley was on, being enamored with Nipper and the megaphone. You know, was there ever a better logo than that? I mean, come on.
Ah, that is it. Man, you said so many things there. We go on a million tangents, but the next follow-up is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
It's both, and I think that it depends on how much it frees or chains you. If you can be free, if you can pull the trick off of being freed by memory and not being stuck with it, and we know people who are stuck with what was as opposed to what is, and
Yeah.
seeing the damage that gets done when you're stuck creatively.
Yeah. Ira, tell me someone within your immediate family, just briefly, and then outside your immediate family who had an impact on you like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
Well, that's easy. My brother bought me my first guitar, and because my parents, in their wisdom, thought one guitar player was enough for the family, and I wanted to play drums, and that was definitely that was a non-starter. I think I would have had my choice of clarinet, violin, or accordion, which were the go-to staples at the time, and none of them really had much magnetism for me. So my brother, who was on tour at that point, it was the early '60s, came back and he bought this guitar in New Orleans. It was a Gibson Melody Maker, bottom of the bottom, lowest model on the line. And it was, I mean, it was phenomenal. It was just, what do? I guess I have to start playing. What I didn't know Maybe I knew it right away, but it went over my head, and it stayed over my head for years and years. The guitar had belonged to Dale Hawkins,
Wow.
who wrote Susie Q. Now, I don't know if he wrote it on this guitar, if this was just an extra, but it was completely lost on me that this guitar, which was my first instrument, belonged to Dale Hawkins. Um, and I got rid of it. I don't know. I outgrew it. It was it was a beginner instrument, and I remember my brother he was pretty upset. You got rid of that guitar. I said, well, it really wasn't very good. I mean, it got me started, but severe limitations technically. Then he started telling me who it was, and I felt, of course, I felt horrible. But so that was in the family influence, directly responsible for getting me started playing music.
Now,
Out
outside
of
your immediate family, one early role model or someone who had an impact.
Probably Winston Churchill.
Wow,
Hearing
what'd you get from them?
he called me and asked me my advice all the time. No, my mother was born in England. Her side of the family was English. Traveling through England from somewhere in Eastern Europe, and she was born there. And I recently dug up some photos. As it turns out, we still have a large English family, and there was a photo of two RAF pilots. I believe they were both killed during the war, and my mother would refer to them as, "Oh, that was Don and so, and what a tragedy." And but I remember hearing, early war movies or speeches, whatever it was, hearing Churchill's voice or a reenactment. Richard Burton did a series called The Valiant Years, early 50s, early 60s, late 50s. It was a British show. And he would read the speeches. Richard Burton would read the speeches. Richard Burton could read the phone book. And so I was so struck, and still am, by the cadence, by the poetry, by the power of what that guy was able to do, Churchill, with a speech impediment, being drunk and being bipolar.
Oh my God. Dig this to McLuhan really quick. One of McLuhan's main lines he got from John Culkin, but they credit to Marshall too. We then they shape us. It was just this main thing he did his whole career. It's not settling for an aphorism or an epiphany. It's how do you take it farther?
Right.
That, you know where he got that from? Churchill.
Yeah.
Churchill said, we shape our buildings, then they shape us.
Yeah.
And they just substitute the word tools for buildings.
Yeah.
And it's really a great line.
I mean, again, for any of your listeners who are not familiar, a lot of the stuff's still online, YouTube stuff. Listen to this guy's language. It's so carefully polished poetry, designed to be propaganda, designed to be certainly inspirational, but and then with as it turns out, a really flawed human being delivering it.
Amazing.
I mean,
but are you hearing Churchill on the radio?
Oh no. I mean,
how are you? When you were a kid, you were reading.
Yeah, I mean, all those shows there, they would watch shows with. I remember hearing the speeches all the time. I could probably recite some of them. And
you mean radio or TV or both?
Probably TV.
TV, okay.
Probably.
So you were raised Jewish. Did you ever check out?
I did.
About what age?
Oh, I would say my father died when I was 15, and everything got much more relaxed in terms of adherence. My mother was much more moderate in her approach. I mean, she still was observant, but my father's side these were Eastern European shtetl Jews.
Yeah.
And they really only knew one way to do things. It was, you're all in. You're observant, and this is how you do it.
Yeah.
And so when my father died, a lot of the strict observance and adherence went away. And subsequent to that, I really kind of left it. My first wife was a Presbyterian. I mean, how could I get further than that? And that's when I discovered, with my first wife, I discovered where the Judaism was for me. And it was still there. It just wasn't exactly in the shape that I was given as a kid. And so it was kind of a journey back to seeing, well, I like this stuff. I don't like that stuff, and it's a work in progress, this kind of a thing, where there's, I think, just the notion of trying to make things relevant in a way that it's not supposed to be, because it's thousands of years old. But I guess that's what Reform Jews try to do, somehow incorporate the modern world. Reform Judaism was a product of the German Enlightenment, of all things.
Yeah.
And so they tried to bring this thing into, okay, we're not smiting, this one and slewing this one and offering burnt offerings. We're reading books, we're making scientific discoveries. So how do we integrate into life? And so I think that's how I sort of came back, was to realize, well, it's still in me, but it wasn't what I was given.
Do you pray?
Sometimes, I think.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Good job.
Do
well
evil
done.
Yeah. Do
Well
evil
done.
do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Oh gosh. I think they exist.
Yeah.
I think we know some of them. And both, yeah, and whatever negative dark energies attach themselves to people and conveniently find a host, and we're off to the races.
Host, what a great word. So you anticipated Alan Watts in this. Ira, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? Few modern thinkers, Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Right.
Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Right. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. Fellini says, I need an enemy. And Walt Whitman says, I no doubt deserve my enemies. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you react to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I think he's probably right. I want to add one to the list, a quick anecdote of an Oscar Levant story in his book, A Talent for Genius. Good reading for you, Jerry. Talent for Genius, Oscar Levant's biography. He was brought up to the draft board, which is already an improbability during the war. And they asked him, well, Mr. Levant, could you kill anybody if you had to? And he said, a complete stranger? Never. My best friends? Easily.
That's good. Yes. Best friends easily.
Yeah, something like that. But I think Alan is right. I think acknowledging your enemy empowers them, but also acknowledging your role in it.
Yeah.
How is it that you have become in that position? You have to take stock and acknowledge what it was and what it is, your part in this thing.
Yeah.
I've heard that very lecture not long ago. It was a couple of weeks ago even, and because I've heard it a number of times, and when I listened to it again, because Alan, as you know, he's all over the place, and he'll kind of stay on subject for maybe a couple of minutes, and then he's off to something else. And I had to think about it this newer time of hearing it. Is he right about that? I think he's still right, but I think there's more to it, and I'm not sure what the more to it is yet.
Yeah.
But I think he's onto it.
Yeah, because people flip it. They go, well, if you don't acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. So it's sort of like another Eastern philosophy guy from the West Ram Dass said, I'm having a real hard time loving George Bush, like
Right.
fill in the blank. I'm having a real hard time loving
Right.
Putin or Trump.
Right.
So it was good. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years, I love how you, years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism.
Mhm.
Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Because I think the presenter is the key to this. So in the case of Faulkner's fiction, seeing the world through his eyes, seeing that tree through James Joyce's eyes is going to give us a view of that tree that maybe we hadn't considered.
Yeah.
I think that, like you said earlier, the antenna story of an artist. The blessing and the curse of the artist to me is that they're raw nerves, and they're delicate souls, a lot of them, so they need to protect themselves because so much is coming in.
Yeah.
And so, and with the productive ones, a lot comes out. And say, like in the case of Joan Didion, I mean, look what she wrote. And so what an observer. I mean, she had such a keen eye. She was like a, multi-eyed, multi-eared human. She was picking up all this stuff.
Yeah.
That I think the artists that we probably admire most do that. The artist, what was that wonderful quote of Joni Mitchell's? I think she was asked, do you hope that we will discover something of you when we listen to your music? I think was the question. And she says, no, I hope you'll discover something of yourself.
Yeah.
When you listen to my music. And I thought, boy, she's Joni, of course, but that is so on target. Totally. She's out of the picture at that point. It's what you do with it. It's how you see that tree. It's not how Joyce wrote us to look at the tree. It's what you do with it.
So well put, Ira. That's total McLuhan too. 1940 to 1980, he writes 22 books. He's known for The Medium is the Message or The Medium is the Massage. People don't know. Mid-career, he updated it to The User is the Content. Exactly what Joni was saying. Yeah. The user is the content. So you kind of told us this, but I want to know the tipping point. You're sitting on the toilet singing these cantor. You're singing Glenn Miller mixed with Jewish music. You got a
I thought Glenn Miller was Jewish.
He started his act. Benny Goodman and Glenn Miller, as teenagers, started their act on the Venice Pier. They both started there. So basically, you have this brother who's how many years older is Elliot?
He's eight and a half years older.
8.5 years older. So he's influencing you. Your dad, your parents are influencing your music. At what point? Because you're a lyricist and the music songwriter, a melody writer. What point did you go, I can do that? I can write lyrics and write music. Where was that tipping point?
Oh, there wasn't a tipping point. It was always there. I was very beyond blessed to have been around all of these musicians who would come to the house, friends of my brother's, who became really world-known people. The first time I'd ever seen a Wurlitzer piano, electric piano, was played by this guy named Bruce Johnson, who later became one of the Beach Boys. But Bruce was a friend of my brother's, and he brought this little piano. My mother played a little piano, so I think she even played a little bit. Bruce sets up his little Wurlitzer that had the little oval speaker in it, and I got to hear that. I was probably 10 years old before I was playing. Don Peake, a celebrated member of the Wrecking Crew, he even played at my bar mitzvah. Would show me things. And I remember I started a song I thought was absolutely original. It was 3 chords, and I showed it first to Don Tom Peake. And I was just playing chords. I thought, well, this is a song, here's da 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 da. It was like, a simple chord progression. And he encouraged me. He didn't say it was good or bad. He said, well, yeah, that's what you do. You're doing the right thing. So there was no tipping point. I was by 16, I had signed a record deal. I was on Capitol Records with this band that was somewhat established. Again, through my brother, who was friends with the manager. And so I started writing songs with and for the band at age 16. Nick Vinay was our producer, who later produced Linda Ronstadt and a bunch of other people. So it was all part of playing guitar, singing with the band, writing was always a big mix, and recording. I always had I had my Wallensack reel-to-reel machine. So the stuff was always in the mix. There was never, well, I think I should learn how to write songs. It was always part of the earliest gestation.
So, Ira, perfect lead-in. A screenwriting teacher told me a great film, great art, great song is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play when you're writing a song?
Well, it's everything. It's what makes you do it. And I think it's what sustains you through the process. And so you could start, I've started songs a number of different ways over the years. Sometimes it's a chord progression. It's a little lick on the guitar. It's a keyboard thing. It's lyric, all right. I had it, I thought we might discuss. Here's my latest. I recopy it all the time. These are phrases that I've collected over, and then as I use them for songs, I cross them out and I'll handwrite another one. And so sometimes it'll be a phrase.
Yeah.
That and they're sitting here, and I'll look at it, and one day, like, here's a good one: a large man at large. So, I mean, it's like this stuff to me comes from all different places, but intention is the fuel that keeps it going. Otherwise, you'll give up and you won't finish. So, is it going to sound, I mean, people have said about hearing my music, well, it sounds like you, which I take as a big compliment. I don't know what that is. I with the way we do, for the distribution networks, for the streaming networks, you have to create these genomes. What does it sound like? Who does it? I mean, it's preposterous. Like, again, Frank's quote, writing about music's like dancing about architecture. That one has. Yeah. So how do you quantify through words?
Yeah.
This experience? Well, I can't. I try to approximate it. What did I say? Someone described my music. Well, I think it's Charles Bukowski meets Peter Gabriel. I mean.
Oh, that's good. I was going to ask you that.
I'll try something. I'll do something. But the intention, your question about the intention, it takes all these different forms. And when I'm writing by myself, it's different than with in collaboration. I was working just last night, with the drummer in my band, Jackie O, David Raven, magnificent drummer and really good songwriter. And we've written songs together. And so we were working on this song that I had started. And he had taken it to a place I didn't really care for. I didn't like where he was going. I said, well, why are you ignoring these lyrics I had given you? Because I think some of them are good. And he said, now that I hear you singing them, and he used the word intention. What was your intent? My intention was to make something you'd like,
that leads perfectly into this next question, the follow-up. That's perfect. But I have to tell you one thing. They asked the Brill Building joke was, what comes first, the melody or the words? And they said the phone call. But Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your listener when you're writing your song?
all the
In
time.
this case, you all the time. And in this
Yeah,
case, how much are you thinking of your co-collaborator? Yeah.
all the time. Everything's in play. But I will tell you this, because I do a fair amount of drum programming. I love using real musicians when I can, but I also program drums, and I've gotten really good at it over the years because I'm not a good drummer, but I can think like one.
Yeah.
I can't play drums well, but I know I've been around great drummers and I know what they do to a large degree. And so when I program drums, you can give an option of writing the creating the sound of the drums from the perspective of the drummer or from the perspective of the audience coming over the speakers. Now, typically, a right-handed drummer has the hi-hat on the left side of the kit, stage left. But if you're sitting behind the drum kit, the hi-hat it's on your left and the ride is on the right, and if you're right-handed. But you can also program these things as if you were the audience. So the audience would hear it out of the left speaker. I'm sorry, wrong, out of the right speaker, because it's the left side. And I typically, and I spend a little time, well, how do I want this perspective? How do I want to present this? I'll present it typically as if I was playing it, so I can see the audience in the abstraction, as opposed to being in the audience looking at the drummer. I want to be the drummer. I don't want to look at the drummer. So the presentation is audience thinking. And this is all, we could probably go hours on this. The operating in a vacuum situation, especially during COVID, that we have found ourselves in, we had a head start. Musicians had a head start with this because we've been sending files around to each other for years to good effect. I mean, there's ways of doing it. It's never the same as being in a room and reacting in real time, energy wise, to that person next to you or the person over there. But we already had in place the infrastructure for creating what sounds like ensemble work, even though it's one at a time. All these videos that people saw that we're still seeing online of people singing in the squares, they were done separately, folks.
Yeah.
Believe it. They're done separately. They are put together later, and they're remarkable in that they sound remarkably cohesive. But what's missing is the fundamental glue. Steve Bartek, the guitar player in our band, and his dear friend, and he and I are doing our own recordings. He's got this, and Steve is still the main orchestrator for Danny Elfman. All the Boingo stuff goes back with him. He has this, it's like a mantra for him, which is not lost on me. But he always talks about when things aren't right, he says, well, it feels like they're not playing in the same room together. That's his big deal. And he's right, because when we are creating, when we are feeding off of each other's energy, and it's wordless.
Yeah.
I can look at him and suddenly we are playing together without having to say anything. That never happens unless that intention, in this case, that we're an audience to each other.
It's beautiful. What's the function of music?
There's a lot of functions. Healing is one that comes to mind first.
I like that.
Self-healing.
Healing, self-healing.
Yeah.
Let's go with that because we're going to get into music finally. Sure. And I know we have been, but my friend says the 3 T's of music: technique, theory, and taste. So we know what technique is. You can learn how to play. Theory, you know what chords or structure. How does one acquire taste?
You need to be Catholic in your tastes, small c.
Which means what?
Universal.
Universal, yeah.
So, I mean, the people who I admired, I still admire, I suspect you as well, are the people who are very broad in their tastes
Yeah.
and incite, I don't want to say necessarily influences, but they can cite effect upon their perceptions. Uh, and we keep talking about Frank, but Frank's a perfect example. So Johnny Guitar Watson meets Stockhausen, okay,
Yeah.
and how does one even reconcile that? Well, you can
Yeah.
reconcile it very easily if you see the the enormous amount of gravitas that comes from you listening to Johnny Guitar Watson. And when you see the odd pairings, like I described, me, Bukowski, Peter Gabriel, well, they're both very important people to me for different reasons, but they all play together. So a taste to me is, you know, it's the end result of having been curious to take
Beautiful.
in.
Really well put. And you just brought up what I always call Frank as an alchemist. Same
Yeah,
with Preston Sturgis. They did something special. They take two known things, Johnny Guitar Watson and Stockhausen, put them together and come up with a third
that's
new unknown thing like theatrical rock, whatever you want to say
that's
Frank
right.
invented. And then they satirize their new invention.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And
And
so,
so,
I saw, you know, the people, again, the people who I admire now, who I have admired, they all kind of share that in common. They're
yeah,
very broad. They're broad in taste. They're
yeah,
broad in interest. And the ones, when we talked a little earlier about old ideas, holding on to old ideas, that's where the death part comes in. You have to be open. The German word for curious is neugierig, meaning hungry for something new. That's German for curious, which to me is uh, that's the necessary component for all this stuff. That and restlessness.
nice. So, um, Monk said there's no wrong notes. Any comment?
He's absolutely right. No wrong notes. Absolutely right.
And
No
Miles,
comment.
yeah, Miles talked about the space between notes. How do
Mm-hmm.
you navigate this? How do you, I don't even know what verb, how do you incorporate knowing the space between notes?
I had the great fortune when I finally studied formally. I studied with a few people, some classes, but one man in particular. He's no longer with us, Joseph Valenti. May he rest in peace. World class. He became a conductor, but he was just a world class musician, and he taught this course. It was one on one, and I studied with him, and I turned a lot of people on to him. Um, and he created this. It was a reading technique. How do you learn how to read music? Uh, and then apply it to a guitar, which is a difficult reading instrument because of the fact that the same note appears, the same pitch appears on a number of different areas on the instrument. So he created this gibberish music. You couldn't memorize it. You had to read it. It was non-music music. And he would have his back to me. He knew it so well. He knew what the gibberish was. He had his back to me and he stopped me. He said, "You're not playing the rests properly." And I had no idea what he was talking about because when you're young, of course, the last thing you want to do is stop playing. It's all about, and then I said, and then I'm not, it's, diarrhea of the hand. And so it gave me great pause because it was the first time I ever thought about the rest, the written rest in music as important, if not more important, than the note that is not a rest. And he spent a lot we spent a lot of time going over this stuff. No, that's a dotted half note rest. It's 3 beats of nothing, which is something. How is nothing something? How is zero something? Well, it is, because, as Miles Davis said, music is what happens when it's the space in between. The space in between the notes is what makes music. Organized sound in time.
Yeah, that's McLuhan says the gap is where the action is, but George Clinton really nailed it. He says funk is the absence of.
That's right. So, and you know, when and especially young musicians are guilty. I was guilty of it. You want to play fast, you want to play loud, you want to play a lot of stuff, and you're not communicating mostly to yourself. And then you start to listen more, especially if you record a lot, and you start to realize, well, I'm not really saying much here. And then you hear, you know, the prime example, BB King plays 3 notes and everybody knows who it is. Right?
Exactly.
So why is that? It's because we are accustomed, humans are accustomed to the space between words. Otherwise, it's one long sentence, right? It's one just blah, 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 blah. So music is the same way. And so, yes, I became very aware, fortunately at a young enough age to where I could put it to work, about the importance of space.
It's beautiful. It's dynamics. You know, you anticipated another question perfectly. Ben Ratliff, a music writer, says, I mean sound as it has long functioned among jazz players as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in one single note. So you gave a perfect example. BB had 3. That's pretty good. And so he used the adjectives. For Miles, he said fragile and pointed. For Coleman Hawkins, ripe, mellow. Coltrane, slightly undercooked, urgent. So if you had a music writer that you respect use 2 adjectives for the Ira sound, what 2 adjectives would you feel accurate? Or, you know, it doesn't have to be adjectives. You know what I'm talking about.
Unexpected, I hear, and I like that.
Unexpected?
Unexpected.
That's nice.
And original.
That is beautiful.
You know, I want to put Bob Dylan into that mix too. As soon as
Yeah.
Bob plays a couple of notes on the harmonica, you're there.
Yep.
You're right there. And he's not, you know, he's far from the world's best harmonica player, but he's, in my opinion, he's one of the world's greatest harmonica players. Why? Because when he plays, everything happens.
Yeah.
And it's a mess sometimes. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
That's the perfect. I saw Albert King play at the Music Machine, and every solo was the same, but it didn't matter. You know, it had so much feeling. It's like I still
wait for the next one that was the same thing. I'll have another one, please.
So here's a McLuhan line on song. And, you know, I spoke with a very successful songwriter the other day, and I should really know if he's saying song meaning music or song meaning a song with lyrics. So you can put it in the context you want. The McLuhan quote goes like this: song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference.
I like that.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, think about Indian music, which I don't speak any of the language of, but when I hear it, I'm hearing these bursts of color, bursts of sound, bursts of notes. If it's a sitar or sarod or veena or any of the or tabla, certainly. To me, that's what the language is telling them.
Yeah.
And no, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think that we're trying to replicate speech with music in many ways. You know, you hear about his guitar solo was very lyrical.
Yeah.
Right. It was It was a sad lament. Well, those are words. Those are that's not a guitar. That's those. But people use that to describe it because I think it comes from the language.
It's metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's a metaphor? Tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh. Because that's the opposite. How could an instrumental make you laugh if there's no words involved? But they can.
Oh God, there's a whole bunch of them. Well, can I just make a short list quickly?
Well, just
Walk Don't Run, the original by the Ventures, which was a jazz song, by the way. It was written by Johnny Smith. But
that's right. Amazing.
yeah, Walk Don't Run makes me laugh, especially when it comes to the drum part. There's a big drum. It's like I can just see the guy like, hey, here comes I'm happening now, and goes for it. and there's like it's a song of guitar posing almost. I love it. Beck's Bolero. When there's a Keith Moon is the drummer on Beck's Bolero, and it's Keith Moon. It's totally explosive, and in the middle section, I think you can hear him yelling. It goes to the break, the middle break. The British call it the middle eight, and it cracks me up every time I hear it because I can just see them in the studio with this complete animal playing drums. Who we know he had to flame out. Keith Moon couldn't have lived. He was just all energy. He was like a meteor. Instrumental.
Well, that's enough. That's good because we could do a whole salon on it.
Yeah,
but it's amazing because I always say Keith hit the drums as hard as Elvin Jones. He was like the Elvin Jones of rock drummers.
Yeah.
So one more music question or another one. I'm curious. Copeland says the four elements of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I want you to tell me how you integrate the four. Are you more this or more that, or you want all four to be working equally? But first, in layperson's terms, what is tone color?
Tone color to me is the character of a given instrument or sound. So when I think of brass instruments, let's say, I mean, I'm a literalist with this stuff. I see yellow. I see bright color. Strings are darker to me. Drums are flashes of light to me. But tone color is ultimately what, say, in a given song, the components are going to add up to making. So, you're sitting around in a room. You probably saw the Beatle movie, the Get Back thing that just played of Peter Jackson thing. So what was interesting about that, which was no surprise to really any musician, was they were mortals after all. We knew that. They're sitting in a room trying to figure it out. They're just trying to figure it out. They don't know where it's going, and it looks pretty haphazard because it is. We don't know sitting here now that this song down the line is going to be Get Back. We just don't know that. We're in discovery. And so, well, what if we add, when Billy Preston shows up, suddenly the Fender Rhodes comes in. Whoa, it wasn't just his energy, but I think a lot of it was. But suddenly this new color shows up. They hadn't had an electric piano playing with them. And suddenly this thing just lifts. Now it lifted for a bunch of reasons, some of which the ones you mentioned. Rhythm was newly injected. Melody was newly injected. Rhythm was, did I say rhythm first?
Yeah, rhythm, melody, and then
tone color. Yeah. And now I'll add a fourth, the personality of the guy playing it.
Right.
All into play. And now you hear this piece of music, in the case of this example, the song Get Back, that is fully, it's a full spectrum recording, as it were, because all of those elements are now satisfied. They're all in a balance with each other, which is why, millions and millions of people hear this thing. Oh, I like this. Why do they like it? Well, go down the list of the reasons. There's a lot of reasons, but I think relevant to this discussion, the main reason is all four of those elements are satisfied.
Yeah.
And they're in balance.
Yeah.
And so the tone color in that particular incident, as I think back about when he shows up, when Billy Preston shows up and he's playing the Fender Rhodes, suddenly this thing is coming from nowhere and it's this new wash of color.
Yeah. But Ira, I have to interject this before we carry on that topic for a second. Is my friend was theorizing Badalamenti soundtracks for David Lynch films, saying, when there's red, it's this note. And, I went up to Frank the next day and I says, what color is C? Is the C note? And he goes, I don't know. He said red or blue. And he says, I don't know. Go ask Rimsky-Korsakov.
Yeah.
But in your approach to music, you sort of talked about it, but do you equally, being Ira, go melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color are all equal, or are you more of one? What do you emphasize more?
It's case by case. So, for example, a lot of songs for me start with rhythm.
Yeah.
Just start with rhythm. Something that makes me feel, well, it's not going to be a ballad. It's not going to be this. It'll be this. Or it's not even what it's not going to be. It'll be more what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And I think that rhythm is an easy way to start. It kind of puts you into the sandbox. And given the tools that we have these days, it's almost impossible to fail if you start with rhythm, because you're already being given so much information. Tone color would probably be my next, because to me, tone color also establishes mood. But then, as I said earlier, if I have some melody in my brain floating around, or it quickly joins in. So I think that depending when you would ask, if you were observing me or anybody writing, well, where are you now with it? Well, I'm working on some rhythm stuff. Oh, okay. And then 2 days later, where are you now? Well, I'm working on some lyrics that are coming away. So they all kind of come in and out of play. They're all ultimately codependent.
Exactly. And then two of my film heroes have this idea. George Manupelli says, ignore yourself. Jonas Mika says, there is no self-expression. But Cecil Taylor, the jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. It's a stupid question. I know it's both and it depends, but is art making, song making more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever culture, technology, and environments are dominant?
Oh, I think it's equal doses of both. I can say easily to you rather, that if I listen back to a piece of mine that I wrote 6 months ago, a year ago, 5, 10 years ago, I have no idea how I did it. I really don't. And sometimes I have to relearn these things to play them. And I have no idea, what did I do? If I was smart enough to have written some of them down, that's easier for me. But a lot of the stuff really, it's a cliche we've been hearing for decades. I don't know, it just comes through me. It really does when you allow it to. When you're quiet enough, when you are really in a position to where, for example, for me particularly, if I practice a lot, which I tend to do, I still practice a lot. But then muscle memory takes care of so many other things. I don't have to worry about, gee, how do I play this thing? If I hear something, I'll be able to play it just because I'm so facile, after spending hours and hours and hours doing essentially calisthenics. But then as this process unfolds, those aspects of, you know, is it self-expression? Is it just coming through me? They all melt together. They're not even in play. They're only in play. They are only in play after the fact for me. I can look back on something and say, oh, okay, I can see where I was going now. I can't necessarily see where I'm going when I'm going there. I can only do it in retrospect.
Yeah.
And in collaboration, it's a whole lot easier because now I'm observing my collaborator.
Yeah.
I see what he or she is doing. I mean, like this, we met through Gabby. So I'm working with Gabby on these things. We're writing a song now as we speak. And she wanted to do something that had this in it. And I said, well, that's a lot of stuff to put in. She wanted to do these things before we started working. Well, I want it to be a chord progression that does this. And I said, well, I don't know what that means. I think melody is gonna direct us, or rhythm is gonna direct us. But to start in with very fixed, and maybe it's her European upbringing, that there's a formalized aspect to the process. And so I just said, well, let's just watch it unfold rather than imposing it's going to be an E chord and now a G sharp and da-da-da. I don't know that yet.
Yeah.
You don't know it yet. But we're going to find out if we pay attention to each other.
Yeah.
And that's when, this process of things coming through you starts to take place. And it happens easily. It's effortless. Kenny Werner, I think is the pianist, Kenny Werner, played with Ari Honig, one of the greatest jazz drummers I've heard in decades. And Kenny Werner wrote a book called Effortless Mastery. And he touches on this kind of stuff. He's a wonderful jazz musician. And everyone says the same thing in different words. Creative people are all saying the same thing. The cliche interview. Well, where do you get your ideas from? That was, asking a writer. That's the most ridiculous question you'd ever want to ask anybody. They have no idea. I steal them. I don't know. But how do you know when things are working right? I'm gonna pull a Jerry on you. Picasso. How did Picasso know when a painting was done? You know that one of his?
No, tell me.
He says, they said, well, how do you know when you're done? He says, when you can walk away from it.
Yeah.
And that is so true with really anything you're doing. Certainly for me. How do I know a song is done? Especially now with technology that allows you to go down rabbit holes of rabbit holes, because there's really nothing we can't do given the modern technology. Nothing. We have no more dead end streets. We have no more. We have no more. You've passed the fail-safe point, and now you're screwed. No, it never happens. And the joke, which a lot of people know, if the Beatles had Pro Tools, they'd still be working on Pepper.
That's great. But Ira, you nailed it. So it's like a Mobius strip or two Mobius strips that are because the Picasso comeback is they caught Picasso in an art museum dressed up like a workman touching up one of his paintings, and the security guard goes, "You can't do that." He goes, "I'm the artist." It's like, no, we already bought it. Finished.
We bought it. We don't fix it. It's ours.
Then they asked Sun Ra, Ben Sidran asked Sun Ra, "Where do you get your ideas?" And he goes, I listen to the birds in the trees. And he says also, like Eric Dolphy right here in LA used to listen to the crickets.
Mm-hmm.
But the vehicle line I love because they asked Ginger Baker, "Where'd you get your drum sound?" He says, "I was in London when they were bombing. The bombs went off like this. Boom, 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 boom." So that's his drum sound. They asked Clyde, the drummer for James Brown, "Where'd you get your drum sound?" He says, "I'm in Ohio. There's a factory on one side of my house and a what do you call it on the other side? The factory goes like this. psst, psst.
There's the hi- that's the hi-hat.
Yeah, and the other is God, I can't think of the thing on the other side, like a highway or something, but it's like he got it by incorporating those two sounds.
Sure.
It's like also, Bella Fleck says, "How'd you get your sound?" The banjo player, he says, "My brother was in his room listening to Return to Forever, jazz rock fusion, and I was listening to Doc Watson, and I stood in the hallway and I goes,
Heard
how
both.
can I use these two?"
That's good.
But the best was Missy Elliott said, "How did you learn how to sing?" She said, "From car alarms."
Wow. That's nice.
But really the hidden question here, Ira, is can art making, can music making be egoless?
I don't think so. And I've thought about it. It has to be ego balanced, I think.
Yeah.
Egoless, if it was egoless, you probably wouldn't do it.
Wow.
I think the ego as I know it, as I think I know it, is what gets me out of bed in the morning to say, well, I really got to put on this keyboard part. Why? Because my ego is telling me it needs to be done. If I had no, I equate in our world that we're discussing, ego is drive, and when it's in balance, it's drive towards excellence.
Yeah.
If not perfection, it's towards excellence, and if you didn't have it, I don't think you'd get things done. It's like I have a hard time working without a cup of tea or cup of coffee. I just do. Maybe if I was really driven, I could do it without it. But I really feel like I got to get some a little synapse firing going. That's not of my own making.
Ira, what was the motive, your guess or hunch, of the cave artist?
John Lee Hooker, because it's in him and it's got to come out.
I like that. My favorite John Lee Hooker is, "Why did you wear sunglasses on stage?" He said, "Because I didn't want them to know I was crying."
Wow.
That
Hooker to me is, I got to work with Canned Heat. I got to produce them. To go way back to our earlier discussion today, another musician who came in and out of my parents' house with my brother was Larry Taylor.
yeah.
And Larry Taylor, may he rest in peace, was and maybe still is the best bass player I ever heard in my life.
Yes.
First time I ever saw a Fender bass, Larry was playing it, and I didn't know what it was. It looked like this big blown up Stratocaster, but he was playing bass, and we just hit it off. Larry was very much an older brother to me, and in the later '80s, we started talking more about stuff. He knew I was more serious. I wasn't just the kid. And in the early '90s, he asked me to produce Canned Heat. And they had just worked with Hooker. They'd done a lot of stuff with Hooker on and off. And my brother was major into Hooker. I heard Boom, Boom, Boom 10 quadrillion times before the Animals did it. And I thought, once Eric Burdon did it, I thought, Eric, you really, I think Eric was great, but really, Eric, don't do this. John, don't do this. It's like it's like the Stones doing, taking the stuff. It was great. It was laudable that they were doing it. But given your choice, who would you rather hear?
Right.
Would I rather hear John Lee Hooker doing Boom, Boom, Boom or Eric Burdon? Kind of a no-brainer answer.
It's Ira, I got to tell you one John Lee Hooker beefheart. Don Van Vliet, Captain Beefheart, told me once he got a Christmas card from John Lee Hooker.
Wow.
And on the cover of the card, it had John Lee Hooker with a beautiful blonde woman on his knee. And you open up the card and it says, "Merry Christmas from your favorite hooker."
He would call my brother up, Don would. They carried on a great phone conversation relationship. And he would start every conversation with, "What are you watching?" Don was magnificent. Maybe we need to do a separate show about Don.
Oh, we'll definitely. Well, we could do them on all these individuals. So that's the next question. I asked for 90 minutes. I have 10 more. Can you go longer, or do you want to?
I can go about a little under 10 extra.
10 extra. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we can do more. Okay. So in what you've accomplished, which is a lot, Ira, rate these three elements: luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Luck, definitely number one. Luck and good fortune. Skill and ambition for me. Luck, definitely, because, I mean, I've said this enough times over the years. I was just really, really lucky to be born when I was born, to have grown up. My family moved out here from Minneapolis in the late 50s. I grew up right in the bullseye. I went to Fairfax High School, and this school where Phil Spector went over there, and later, after I was gone, the Chili Peppers went there. I mean, Fairfax geographically was in the bullseye of this pop explosion, and there were recording studios all around, and there were clubs all around. And the times in which I was growing up, our culture was driven by music, and it was driven by the dynamic changes of music and how it affected the other parts. So it was just luck. I mean, 10 years later, I always think Sheryl Crow, who I have a lot of respect for, I think she's really a fine musician. She was born 10 years too late.
Yeah.
It seems like she laments not being able to be in the Stones, if they would have ever had it. But you know what I mean? It's like she's too young to do the things that she wished she could have, that she does. She's too young to do the things that I think she wished she could have done, is whatever I'm saying. So I was just lucky that the times were right for me.
Yeah, the golfer Gary Player says the more you practice, the luckier you get.
That's right. That's right. Luck is a big part. Skill, I worked hard. I was really driven, competitively so, with other, specifically guitar players. I always reacted and related well, always with another guitar player. To me, two guitars is unbeatable. And so I've always had great relationships, friendly competitiveness with the other guitar player I'm working with, and we would elevate ourselves. Jay Graydon is still a very good friend of mine, and he played the guitar solo on Peg, stellar musician, and we would push each other. A few years back, I was at his house at 3:00 in the morning. We were playing at his house, just two of us.
Nice, beautiful. Is perception reality?
In that moment, it is.
Yeah.
Until someone says, maybe look at it this way.
T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
There's a lot of echo.
I've never had that answer. That is a good answer.
A lot of echoes, a lot of reverb.
Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I can't say as I have. Impossible? No. Believed is the key word. Oh, I can't say, no.
Yeah, believe is the key word. And the funny thing about the word believe, it has the word lie in the middle of it.
Yes, it does.
And you brought up authenticity earlier. I have to ask you this. This is a Marcel Proust question. On what occasion do you lie?
Sometimes to impress myself with myself.
When
I have these discussions here in my studio by myself. I think as I've gotten older, there's less need to impress.
Yeah.
And less need to invent, and maybe more need to be who you are, which is certainly more acts of discovery.
Work in progress. You'll love this. They asked Tom Waits, On what occasion do you lie? He says, I didn't know you needed an occasion. Ira, tell me one major element, please, that in your creative, many years being creative, one major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
I still want to learn new things musically, even. There's so billions of guitar videos online, and some kid playing Flight of the Bumblebees, 3 years old, and playing. But I'm curious. I think that stayed the same. What has changed? I'm much more in tune with doing things that I really want to do.
Yeah.
And if I really don't want to do something, I'm much more inclined to verbalize that.
Yeah.
I think there's a comfort. I think it's one of the benefits of getting older is that you have an option now. It's not even an option. You have the obligation to recognize, okay, well, I have, X amount left in the sand, in the hourglass, but that's not even important. What is important is that I've come to realize that which feeds me, that which is gratifying, and that which isn't. And so coming to better recognize in the moment, yeah, this is a person I want to work with. Yeah, this is not going to happen. I wasn't as good about that in the past. So that's changed.
Totally. I relate to that 100%. Can you forget to die?
Oh, I'm sure people do. Yeah. Yeah. What was that? There's that great Randy Newman song, I'm Dead, But I Don't Know It.
Nice. 5 Alan Watts questions, really brief, in a few words, just off the top of your head. Who started it all?
Who?
That's wait, I gotta go to your brother. What's the song? I love this song. He told me the title once. The.
Yeah, that's the album. 4 of them. The. Yeah.
Who started it all? Who? Second one, are we going to make it?
No, because it keeps changing. So there's no it to make.
Nice.
It's provisional.
Dude, you're as wise as Alan Watts. Third one, where do we put it?
Where it belongs.
Who's cleaning?
I'm sorry, you cut out of me.
Who's cleaning it up?
Who's cleaning it up? The one with the wisdom.
Is it serious?
Sometimes.
Beautiful. I'm sure Alan would have been proud of you. So, how do you find?
I'm still working on his laugh. I don't smoke, so
How do you find peace of mind?
In little things, cooking.
Nice.
Cooking gives me peace of mind, especially when it turns out well. I like some aspects of gardening. I like sometimes working with wood. Guitars have, of course, really made me hypersensitive to wood and the subtleties that they have, the sound of one to the other. So working with wood, like finishing wood, there's a piece with that. I don't do a lot of it.
Beautiful. There's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist.
Yeah, well, that's my favorite one of all time.
Yeah. So your thoughts just on this in general, not you, but one creates what one resists. You create what you resist. Your thoughts on that idea.
Yeah, I've heard that before, and I think you can fall into that if you're not conscious.
Yeah.
I don't want to make, like, in very practical terms, I don't want to make a schlocky song, you know, something about this piece of music. Maybe it's a lyric, maybe it's a lyric, maybe it's a melody. It could be anything that is just grating on you, but yet you keep going through it, and then you realize, unless you've addressed that thing that's this little rock in your shoe that will never go away unless you are, I'll go back to it, authentic with this thing and honest with yourself, you will create the very thing you didn't want to create, what you resisted doing. So I think it comes back to the awareness in the moment, in the creative moment, which is all the time.
Yeah.
You're an open wound, really. You're
open wound. It reminds me of the two quotes I collected on selling out. Al Flipside says, "Don't sell out, sneak in." And then Paul Schrader wrote, the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail.
Mm-hmm.
Which is sort of funny, because it's sort of like this Louis Buñuel. Again, I forgot this question. I'll ask you now. He says, "I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it."
Well, sure.
So that sounds good, but it's the cliche is the journey's more important than the destination. If the journey's more important, then why do we have to name or seek a destination?
Because I think it's the human condition to have cause and effect, to have, why are you doing this? Well, because I hope something will come from this. I will, going back to the music business as it was, certainly isn't anymore. Well, we're going to get this band together and we're going to rehearse and we'll do the showcase. And it's all this, down the road gratification, forgetting for the fact, and I was guilty because I took part of that stuff, in that stuff. None of it matters. What was the Alan Watts, one of the five, are we going to make it?
Yeah.
That's classic. I mean, no, we're not going to make it because it doesn't exist. And selling out, the Who, I thought Pete Townsend, that was one of the most brilliant things he ever did, the Who Sell Out album.
Yeah.
I mean, that was brilliant. It was lost on most everybody because it was just supposed to be kind of funny. And it was funny because I think he's hilarious.
Yeah.
But the idea that the Who sell out, and in selling out, he snuck in.
Exactly. Boy, Al would love that, because it's like they asked Frank on this TV show, MTV era, they go, he said, well, in the days when Ira was being signed and the 16-year-old at Capitol, those days, they go, hey, I got a demo, and the A&R guy would go, give it to Johnny in the mail department.
He'll know what to do with it.
And then if he likes it, but now they give it to the accounting department, and right. They say, will do the figures show up like that this will sell? So it becomes accountants running it instead of the gut intuition of the youth.
I've sent that video of Frank's hundreds of times to people. We were better off with the guy who smoked the cigar. I don't know, put it out. Than we were with the young hip guy who says, I'm hip and I know what works. Frank was, again, he was just on the money. And he suffered it because he never sold any records. Don never sold any records.
No. Well, Frank was a self-made millionaire, but
yeah.
It is, but I always said, anyways, well, again, we should do more salons where we go into specific topics. But if you were walking down the street, we got 6 more minutes. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I can bring my report card back in. So my
Full
10,
circle.
yeah, we're back. My 10-year-old, I don't know if this is probably not going to show up. Can you
Yeah. Oh,
see?
it showed up. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know that. I had Ira, you got to, we found blank report cards when we were
Yeah.
kids this age, and we filled them out because my sister and I got straight A's.
Look what I
And
got in
we filled,
music.
yes,
I got a
music. C.
C in music. I got a C in music both times. And I have to tell you, Jerry, when I dug this thing out a couple of weeks ago, it was hurtful.
Yeah.
I hadn't started playing yet. But I remember my parents saying something, well, it's music. Oh, you got A's in arithmetic and reading, and you were great. And so my 12-year-old, I was given the choice. My 12-year-old,
Yeah.
ignore what the report card said. Stop. Don't pay attention to the report card. You're going to be okay, kid. If you're honest with yourself, and therefore then honest with people who you care for.
Now,
And
where'd you get that? But Ira, where'd you get that? The way your parents raised you or on your own?
I
More.
think
Which
it was probably both.
yeah.
I was lucky again too. Until my father died, it was an intact family. It was there was the usual amount of dysfunction. A family is a dysfunctional entity anyway. But I think that I felt safe, as a kid.
Yeah.
I felt nurtured as a kid. Um, I think that there were good examples of behavior from both of my parents. Be honorable to people, be honest, treat people well.
Beautiful.
So I think, and then certainly going out into the world, and with that as kind of they push you off in your little life raft, and you have your provisions your parents give you, and see how you do. And I did okay with that because I had a good stock of things to draw from. So
Beautiful. Couple more and we're out of here. Thornton Wilder said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes, Ira. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
I think it's, finding what, well, let me hold that for just a second. Many years ago, I watched a Johnny Carson show, and Dizzy Gillespie was on.
Yeah.
And he was already quite older, but he played a little, and he gets on the couch with Johnny, and Johnny's asking him questions, and he said, I'll never forget it. Johnny says, so Diz, what's it all about? And I expected him to say something like, well, it's jazz, and it's it's playing the highest note you can play, whatever it was. And he instead said, it's about service. And I didn't know what he meant. For starters, I was disappointed because I just figured, well, it'd be some musical gem from the master himself. And then as time went by, I started to understand, because I never forgot it, what it meant, being of service. How can you help other people
Totally
as you're helping yourself? So I think that's kind of what, if there's an it, are we going to make it, Alan Watts, or it? The it is, it's about, we are in this together, and to be kind to each other, and to be of service by being your most honest person.
It's beautiful. Eden Abe said it great in Nature Boy. The greatest lesson you'll ever learn is to love and be loved in return. Amazing words.
Amen.
Got the melody from a Jewish cantor, man. The ultimate song. Okay, last question, and I hope this never ends, Ira. It's been amazing. What gives you the most optimism?
Wow. I think the human spirit when acting in harmony.
Yeah.
I think what happened in Kansas last week is a good example of that.
Yes.
If I can stay away from being too political. Uh,
No, it is. It is
that
hope.
was optimistic. That was complete optimism.
Beautiful.
They
Yep.
defied the odds and they said, well, this is what we're going to do in concert.
Yeah. Really beautiful, Ira. It's been truly enlightening. I love
Absolutely.
you. I love you. I love your brother. I love your whole family.
Oh, no.
And I thank you. And I'm going to hit the end broadcast, but I hope this never ends. And I do want to do another salon.
We'll do it.
Yes.
We'll do it. Be well.
Thank you, Ira.